Hello, everyone. So I wanted to make a video today to talk a little bit about the connection between the language of the mind and the language of the body. So this body-mind connection, this has been a discussion for many years now, but in particular, language, in other words, words that we use to describe our experience, and then the physical sensations that we have in our body, and the way that there's an interaction between those two things. This is something that I'm looking at together with all the other participants in the Expand Your World class. It's a weekly class that I offer, and I'll have information below this video. And I actually want to use as an example what we're doing this month in the class, and I'm just going to go through sort of like what the 5 classes in September of 2021 are all about. And of course, you're invited to class, but whether or not you check out the class, I think you'll see that the way I'm connecting these themes from actual words, and I'll be showing you some particular words that are the basis for the class series in a moment, connecting those words to a somatic experience of, in other words, an experience in the body, a sensory experience, and how we can take in words as you're doing listening to this video, or anytime you're talking with another person or reading a book, you're taking in words, you're taking in human language, which is symbolic because the sounds that I'm speaking right now would be meaningless to you if you don't speak English, just like I don't understand when someone's speaking Chinese. But there's also something we do with those words. We translate them into images. They call up experiences, and the images, the memories, the experiences we have, and our experience in the present moment is also very much a physical experience. I can feel in this moment the pressure of my bottom where I'm sitting on the floor. I can feel the movements of my hands as I'm gesturing, right? And this is happening all the time. But when we're in the sort of language of the mind, I'll call it, in other words, just human language, the language of symbols, the language that is written as a series of letters or other some kind of alphabet. That's the bridge I want to make. So I'm going to show you what happens in the class. We do some movement practice inspired by awareness through movement, the Feldenkrais method, and we also have a little passage or two from some thinker that evokes something that really, it's like a conversation starter for the class. And the class is conversation. We face each other and we speak and we exchange ideas through words, but we also do a movement exploration that grows out of the ideas in those words. And then after we do that, when our bodies feel different than they did before the exploration, we come back to speak again. And we often find that our experience of the meaning of the words has changed, or it has become somehow enriched or embellished. So I'm going to talk about the 5 classes in the September series for the Expand Your World. One of those classes already happened, and I can describe it a little bit. And then the 4 other classes are still coming up, but I'm just going to give a couple of ideas of my thoughts on what I'm probably going to bring into those classes. No promises, but if it makes you curious, of course, you can join the class, and you can sign up for the whole September series. You'll get the recording of the first class that already happened. But so let's take a look at this. And the first class was on the following quote. There was 2 quotes. Okay, so the theme was listening underfoot. And from Paulina Oliveros, she said, "Walk so silently that the bottoms of your feet become ears." And Thich Nhat Hanh said a similar thing, but a little different. "Walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet." Okay, so walk as if so silently that the bottom of your feet become ears, or walk as if you're kissing the ground with your feet. Well, these are obviously metaphorical ideas, but they suggest something about a quality of walking. A quality of walking that maybe you couldn't evoke just by saying, well, walking is putting one foot in front of the other and moving through space, which it is. But what do we do when we kiss with our lips? What is that expression? It could be you're kissing your lover. It could be you're kissing your child on the forehead. It could be that you're kissing a dog or a baby. But the kiss, it has a meaning. Generally speaking, it's going to be a affection of some kind, and it's also this act that it happens here at the mouth, where we feed, where we speak, and there's a certain feeling. Of course, I mentioned these different kisses because they're different. You don't kiss your lover or your child in the same way, but you do something with your lips. There's a whatever it is, right? That isn't typically what you do with your feet. And yet there's a quality that is very easy for you to understand if you've ever kissed someone or something or whatever you do when you're kissing. And you can imagine how you might do that with your feet. So walk as so silently that as if the bottoms of your feet become ears. Well, the ears obviously take in sound, right? The ears listen. And our ears, in a sense, like I can close my eyes like this and I don't see. But we tend to think of our ears as always being open. Yet, you know that there's a difference between hearing and listening. So when you're listening, you're really attentive to the sound. So there's this act of paying attention and opening and to see what's beyond, and hearing can happen in all directions, whereas we see mostly forward. Maybe we have some peripheral sense, but we can hear in all directions. So what would it mean for your feet to attend to the ground below in the way that your ears can attend to the sonic space out beyond? Well, I won't go through everything we did in the class, but we did do some listening. We were listening at the wall with the ear to the wall. And after experiencing that, and we were listening to the wall and then listening as if we could listen through the wall. And we discovered that listening far out and close in, if you want, you can try this as you listen to the video. Just think of putting your attention through your ear on something very far away, or as if there was a little sound here. And there are muscles in your ear that you can feel if you spend enough time playing with that and paying attention. Well, so when we were listening at the wall, after some time, we began to ask our feet to listen to the ground and listen below the ground. And even though that might be something you've never tried before, this somatic experience of what the ears were doing, there was a way that something changed in the foot, something changed in the legs, something changed in the overall experience of the body by virtue of having this idea of listening below the ground. And of course, that means using your imagination to think of the space below the ground, below the surface. It just broadens your overall attention, right? And so you have a different kind of experience if you're walking and you're listening underfoot. The other thing that we did while lying on the floor, we explored some movements like this with the lips, making a kissing movement, and there was some other movements, opening the mouth, and this set up a kind of subtle movement of the head that began to happen. And then we combined this with the feet that were on the ground, pressing towards the front of the foot, pressing towards the heel, and then setting up a connection with the movement of the head. And there was a way you could feel something happen that was developing through the spine. So when people stood up and walked around at the end, one of the things that we talked about and that people commented on was your feet are down below you, right? And if you're standing upright, they're kind of in this vertical up-down plane, right? But your ears, they go out to the side like this, horizontally. And then your mouth, if you kiss or you're speaking or you're looking and making eye contact, that's going forward, right? So suddenly the experience of walking as if to kiss the ground or as if to listen, there was a connection we made literally to those parts of the body that do, in fact, participate in kissing and listening. And it became this kind of a three-dimensional experience, right? The theme of the class is grounding. But then what we talked about was how it's pretty easy for us to think of grounding as like being connected down there. to the ground. But we talked about how in each other's company, how we can feel more grounded by being together. You can think you're back home with your family, right? There's a certain groundedness because you know how to relate to these people. They're familiar. And you're with a stranger, maybe you don't feel grounded in the same way. So that's just a little window into what we did in the first class. Coming back to the second class in the series, the theme is story walking. And the quote comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. All things are engaged in writing their history. Not a foot steps into the snow or along the ground, but prints and characters more or less lasting, a map of its march. The ground is all memoranda and signatures, and every object covered over with hints. In nature, this self-registration is incessant, and the narrative is the print of the seal. So as I look at this and I think about, okay, what are we going to do next Wednesday? There's certain things that jump out at me here. All things are engaged in writing their history, right? We have a story in our life. So not a foot steps in the snow or along the ground, but prints its character, more or less lasting, a map of its march. So here we can begin to think of walking as a storytelling, right? And my mood, the gestures I'm making, there's something that's going down into the ground. I'm constantly imprinting the ground as I walk. So what if I was conscious of that? The ground is all memoranda and signatures. In other words, I leave an impression, every object covered over with its hints. And so what kind of imprint do I want to make on the ground? So that's something I can imagine we'll play with in the class. Maybe we're used to writing our name. What would it be like to write your name with your feet? As an example of something we could explore there. In nature, the self-registration is incessant and the narrative is the print of the seal. So here Emerson seems to be talking about something that's beyond the human experience, but just if you look at the ground, you're going to see just these stories that are embedded in the ground, right? And of course, we all know that we have a story about ourselves. We often get stuck in certain stories and it limits what we're capable of, but then we can tell a new story about ourselves and move to another stage of our life, potentially. So that is something that we could explore in that class. On September 15, the soles of the feet. This quote comes from John Cage. Thoreau got up each morning and walked to the woods as though he had never been where he was going to, so that whatever was there came to him like liquid into an empty glass. Many people taking such a walk would have their heads so full of other ideas that it would be a long time before they were capable of hearing or seeing. Most people are blinded by themselves. Just thinking back, and I no longer have the words in front of me, but some of the things that stuck out for me was this idea that Thoreau walked with this just freshness. He might have walked in the woods yesterday, but he was able to come into this place of like, this is brand new, brand new, brand new. So of course we walk all the time, one foot after the other, and it's a kind of activity that can very easily become autopilot, right? It can be very easy to just think that there's nothing going on here. I'm just walking. You think about other things. And this is the other point that Cage makes. People are so in their mind that they become disconnected, right, to what's going on outside. I had an experience that has always stuck with me one day when I wanted to go running and I kind of wanted to get a little inspiration. I put on some music that I really liked and I was listening to music. I was kind of like, fired up. It's like, great, now I'm going to go running. Went out and I was running and I went about 2 entire blocks until I realized that music was still playing in my head. And only after 2 blocks I began to hear the birds, right? I was so in my head. And so I had disconnected from the world around me. I mean, I liked the song. It was kind of cool. The song's playing in my head and pumped up and running. And yet I was completely missing a really beautiful day, the birds, all of this. So that's something that we might explore in that class, how to make walking fresh and what happens if we can really clear our mind of all that chatter that's going on. Then does that open up a new experience of walking? The next class in the series sensing what's below. There's two quotations here. The first is from David Abram. We can feel the trees and the rocks underfoot because we are not so unlike them, because we have our own forking limbs and our own mineral composition, because contrary to our inherited conceptions, we are not pure mind stuff, but are tangible bodies of thickness and weight, and so have a great deal in common with the palpable things that we encounter. So this connects back to that first class, the idea of listening underfoot. He's talking about feeling the trees and the rocks underfoot, but then he goes a little further, says we are not so unlike them. We have our own forking limbs, our own mineral composition. And so how are we the same as the nature that surrounds us and that we move through? And he says we're not pure mind stuff. We are tangible bodies of thickness and weight. And so sensing what's below is the theme. And then the second quotation, and this gets to a little bit of probably what we will actually do in the class. Jacoby says, our legs are like foreign bodies to us when we start using them for something other than standing or walking. And Heinrich Jacobi used to like to talk about the people who have no hands or arms and some of the incredible feats that people in that situation have demonstrated. That basically your feet can do everything that your hands can do, but most of us will never learn to use our feet that way because we don't ever experience the need to do so. But there are people who have played the violin with their feet. There are people, you can go on YouTube and just, you can Google people without arms and you'll be amazed at what is possible. And so Jacobi points out that when we try to do things with our feet that we normally do with our hands, suddenly it's like we don't know what our legs are for. An experiment I did not too long ago, if you see over my shoulder, you can see the doorknob here on that door. But I was using my foot to stand on one leg and grab the door and open it, right? And I had to balance in a particular way. I had to, there was a way that my foot wanted to cramp up, but when I played with it for a while, I was able to do it. And that process of playing with it, it being so unfamiliar, really, that idea of it was like a foreign body, it taught me ways to let go of certain musculature in my legs, to breathe in a way that I probably never would have discovered without that particular task. So that's a way that we're going to, make that translation in that class. And again, I'll just remind you what I said earlier. When we do these explorations, then we come together. So if it turns out that we're all opening doors with our feet in that class, then we're going to be coming back together. And we're going to not only talk about it, but we're going to read those words again. We're going to see, how do those words feel now? How is it different? The last class is called Gravity, Levity, and Dignity. And it's another quotation from Heinrich Jacobi. Anyone who has contact with the ground, who is truly standing on their own 2 feet and is therefore standing up straight, is not only upright, but also has the courage to be upstanding. I titled that class Gravity, Levity, and Dignity. And I think it's likely that one of the things we'll play with is the act of standing up from a chair. Because to stand up from a chair is to move your weight upwards. It's to become lighter. You have to, in a sense, levitate, or you have to move upwards, right? But for many people, this is a difficult thing to do. And you'll see people getting out of chair and kind of go, ugh, and they make a noise, or they sit back down in the chair and then they kind of, and they fall. And there's this heaviness, right? Well, if you think about metaphors in language and how we talk about our mood, one of the key metaphors, if not the key metaphor, is our relationship to gravity. How are you doing? Oh, I'm feeling kind of down today, right? And you can imagine if you were an actor in a movie and you were playing a depressed person, how you might sort of sink yourself down. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling upbeat. I'm feeling light, right? And so there's all kinds of phrases that you could look at. Gosh, that person, they were so heavy. They were dragging me down, right? So this quality of, am I physically light or physically heavy? It can it can relate to my posture, but it can also relate to my mood. And what Jacoby talks about is being upright, but to be upstanding, the sense of kind of dignity or courage to speak your mind. And so again, if you want to speak out and stand up for yourself, if you want to share your ideas with the world, you're going to feel good doing that if you're sunken down into the ground? Or would you rather be lifted up, physically lifted up, but would you also feel more uplifted and more able to do that? So again, this is the idea of the class, and I would love to have you join me for the class. But even if you don't come to class, hopefully this just gives you a sense of how we can make connections. It could just be that you're talking with someone and they have a particular way of talking, and you realize that you're having a response in your body to the words that are being said to you. Maybe it's inspiring, maybe it's funny and it makes you feel a little lighter, or maybe it's depressing, you know, like, God, man, talking to this person is just weighing me down, right? But it could be some of these other things. They're telling a certain narrative, and you begin to, if you're walking, let's say you're walking with a friend and talking, and there's like a story that's being told in your conversation as you walk. How are those two things interacting? How does a turn in the conversation, or you know, it could be a turn, you turn a corner in the park and you come into a clearing, and that, but these things, they interact, they're connected. And so in the Expand Your World class, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at the sort of individual somatic experiences that we have. And when we go on the floor and do awareness through movement, we can really investigate that. But then when we come together at the beginning and end of the class, we are in dialogue, and we are putting our attention onto the experience of dialogue. We're not simply having a dialogue, but we're really trying to be self-aware of what does it feel like to face each other, to express ideas, to use these words. And when the words come out into the air between us, how does it resonate in our bodies? And we share those things. And it's been a fantastic practice so far. It's been really exciting to see how it has unfolded. And so this gives you a little glimmer of what it would be like. Of course, you'll have a better sense if you come to class. There is actually on my channel one Expand Your World class that was recorded, that so you can look for that. It's a whole exploration of the silence between sounds. And so we did a whole thing around that. So if you want, you can take a look at that on the channel. There'll be information below this video if you'd like to join the class. Put a comment below if you have any questions. I'll just finally say that if you have heard of circling, the art of circling, or if you're familiar with dialogos as exemplified by John Vervaeke, these are some of the things that inspired the Expand Your World class and this approach that I'm taking right now. I've actually joined the Art of Circling training. So in about a year from now, if all goes well, I may be a certified circler. But again, this is where this is coming from. I hope to offer this class as part of a contribution to a growing community of practices, what Vervaeke would call an ecology of practices out there, things that we can do to cut across the disconnection that's so rampant in our world right now by having embodied experiences of connection together and discovering that we can do that even if we have different points of view, different backgrounds. What we really need to practice not only is those personal practices that we might do on our own, maybe meditating in the morning, just for myself, I meditate, but how can I take that experience of connection that I'm building with myself intentionally into connecting with others so that we can have more connection in the world, because I think we definitely need that these days. All right, I'll wrap up the video here. Thanks for watching.